If you own a Foxbody Mustang, you've probably considered or maybe dreamed of a K-Member upgrade. Well, today I'm walking you through a full front suspension upgrade on my '93 Mustang GT, so stick around. I'm finally getting started on a project that I've wanted to do for a very long time, and that's replace the entire suspension on my Foxbody. Over the last 15 years of owning this car, the suspensions became a mix of parts installed at different times with different goals in mind. It worked, but it was far from ideal, and now it's time to get back to the basics and do a complete upgrade from front to back. But for this video, I'm focusing on just the front suspension, starting with the most iconic piece, the K-Member. And not just any K-Member, I'm talking about the Maximum Motorsports system that includes the control arms, bump steer kit, and all of the accessories. Along with that, I'm upgrading the struts, coil springs, and more. So let's dive into the parts. Right out of the box, the quality of the Maximum Motorsports components immediately stand out. The welds, the finish, the fitment, even the packaging is excellent. The kit includes the tubular K-Member, control arms with bushings, an adjustable rack and pinion bushing kit, and an adjustable tie rod bump steer kit. On top of that, I'm installing the Koni Yellow Series single adjustable struts with Maximum Motorsports Coil-Over kit and 325-pound 10-inch coil springs. And lastly is an Eibach Sway Bar kit to tighten up the front end roll. The overall goal with this setup is to have an aggressive street driving without sacrificing daily comfort, but with modern day performance and adjustability. So let's get to it. First step is getting the car completely off the ground, jacked up on all four corners and leveled from front to back and side to side. Using the same style jack stands all the way around is very important here, especially for later when you're aligning the K-Member. Once the car was secure, I removed the wheels and brake calipers, then separated the tie rod ends. Next, I removed the strut bolts, then separated the spindles from the control arms at the ball joints and the coil springs. If you're working with stock coil springs, just support the lower control arm with the jack, slowly lower it down and take all the pressure out until you can pry it out and safely remove it. At this point, the struts, coil springs, spindles, and sway bar end links were all out of the way. Next up was unbolting the power steering rack. So after disconnecting the steering shaft and removing the two rack and pinion mounting bolts, the rack didn't really need to be fully removed. It could be zip tied up and out of the way during the K-Member removal. So with everything clear, I installed an engine support bar, tightened the support change around the header primary tubes, and unbolted the engine mounts. Next, using a 2-jack system underneath, I removed the frame bolts and slowly lowered the K-Member out of the car. This is that golden moment right here. Seeing the factory K-Member on the floor just really highlights how heavy and bulky it is compared to the Maximum Motorsports piece. It's night and day. Before installing the new K-Member, this is the perfect time to inspect everything like your oil pan gasket, steering rag joint, and the motor mounts. Next, I mounted the control arms to the new K-Member using the factory hardware, except for 2 button head bolts provided by Maximum Motorsports for the front end control arm mounts. This is for improved clearance. Note, there's actually 2 locations you can mount the lower control arms to. I'm going with the lower. After everything was torqued to spec with my 2-jack system, I raised the new K-Member into place and loosely tightened the bolts. Next is to align up the K-Member. Aligning the K-Member is a 2-part process, forward and back and side to side. To do this, Just use plumb bobs dropped at the pinholes in the front by the control arms, and in the rear at the lower control arm bolts that are mounted to the chassis. Once all four are dropped, start with the front and back measurements. After a lot of measuring and K-member adjusting, the front and back measurements were within 1/8 of an inch of each other. So I snugged the bolts even further and C-clamped 2 L brackets that are provided in the kit to prevent forward movement. Next is the side-to-side alignment by measuring the diagonal measurements and matching those within 1/8 of an inch of each other. After several takes and tapping the K-member for adjustment, I was finally ready to torque the bolts down to spec. Next is to reinstall the steering rack using the adjustable rack bushings kit. This allows the rack height to be adjusted for better tie rod geometry. However, once the rack was bolted in place, I noticed it was contacting the oil pan, even at the lowest rack setting. The issue turned out to be the worn out motor mounts, which allowed the engine to sag just enough to create the interference. To fix the problem, I had to raise the engine back up, and I replaced the motor mounts with energy suspension polyurethane versions. All right, you can actually see the difference of the two mounts now that I got the old one out and how much space that energy suspension mount has around the polyurethane versus that crushed rubber from the stock one. So I'll get my new mounts in and we'll get this engine lowered back down. So once I lowered the engine back into place, there was plenty of clearance for the steering rack. So with the rack finally installed, I was ready to move on to the bump steer kit. If you don't know what this does, this is to allow the tie rod ends to be parallel to lower control arms, which is critical for proper geometry. But this kit requires drilling the spindles for 5/8 inch hardware. I attempted to do this with my drill press, bad idea. So I just took them to a machine shop. 25 bucks later, I was set. Once bolted up, I set the initial spacer's length to match the lower control arm angle, knowing that later I would have the final adjustments made. So, with the front suspension coming together, it was time for the Koni single adjustment struts and Maximum Motorsports Coil-Over setup. Now, Koni does offer a dual adjustable strut, but for the driving I'm planning, these will be great. Assembly is straightforward. Just slide the threaded sleeve over the strut, thread on the lower spring perch, and add the bump stop, coil spring, and upper spring perch. Then just install the final thrust bearing, washer, seal, and top plate. Just make sure the upper spring perch is slid down until it's flush with the stepped portion of the strut shaft. Also, you'll need to add a spacer on top of the upper strut shaft, above the mounting hardware, that fits in between the strut plate and caster camber plate. When installing the struts, pay attention to the clearances around the brake lines, inner fender well, and body. Overall, this setup is super simple for ride height and dampening adjustments, and it makes for future spring swaps quick and easy. Next was the Eibach Sway Bar and the end links. So after installing the bushings and brackets, I supported the sway bar, bolting it to the chassis, then installed the end links. Here's a quick tip on the end links. Install one side with all of the hardware except for the last washer. Then go to the other side and jack up underneath the control arm, and you can install all the hardware. Then just go back to the other side and install that last washer, and you're good to go. All right, so at this point, I am ready to adjust the ride height on the car, so I figured I would just walk through it a little bit. Basically, I'm gonna lower the car down, take some measurements on both sides, raise it back up, and then adjust the coil spring. And you just turn it to adjust it. And I'll lower the car back down, raise it back up, and keep doing that process until I get both sides completely done. Well, then after that, I'm gonna take a very slow and short drive around the block just to set the suspension a little bit. bring it back in, recheck everything, readjust if needed, and then from that point, I'm gonna take it to my buddy's performance shop, and he's gonna basically adjust all of the toe, the caster camber, and the bump steer on the car. Because I really don't wanna drive it fast down the highway with everything out of alignment, because it's probably gonna steer pretty erratic at this point. I guess I'll find out. So with the car lowered back onto a level surface with equal tire pressure, I measured from the wheel hub center to the fender, then raised the car back up, adjusted the coilovers, lowered the car back down, measured, raised the car back up, adjusted. I mean, you get the point. It's not fast, but it's an effective way to get your ride high. Overall, the end result is a more precise and far more tunable front suspension that will completely transform how this Foxbody drives. And next, I'll be moving on to the rear suspension in video number 2, and then following that up with some spirited driving videos. So I really thank you for watching, and make sure to hit that subscribe button.